I can't control myself near you." The Apache warrior took the lost woman to his fire. The desert sun burned like a branding iron against Claire's skin as she stumbled through the canyon. 3 days without water. Her horse had broken its leg in a ravine 2 miles back, and she'd been walking ever since. The wagon train she'd been traveling with was nowhere to be seen. They must have thought she died when the rock slide separated her from the group. Her vision blurred. The red rocks seemed to dance and multiply. She fell to her knees, tasting copper and dust. This was how it ended. 23 years old, and she'd die alone in the Arizona territory because she'd wandered too far from camp looking for firewood. A shadow fell across her face. Claire looked up, squinting against the sun. A man stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, with long black hair tied back with a leather cord. He wore buckskin pants and a vest, and carried a rifle with the ease of someone who'd been born holding one. His dark eyes studied her with an intensity that made her forget about dying for a moment. He spoke in a language she didn't understand. Apache, she realized with a jolt of fear. The wagon master had warned everyone about Apache warriors. But this man didn't raise his weapon. Instead, he knelt beside her and lifted a water skin to her lips. The water tasted like salvation. Claire drank greedily until he pulled it away. Too much at once would make her sick. He knew that. He'd done this before. Without asking permission, he scooped her into his arms. Claire wanted to protest, but her body had given up. She felt his heartbeat through his chest as he carried her away from the place where she would have died. His name was Dakota, though she wouldn't learn that until later. Right now, all she knew was the strange safety of being held by someone who should have been her enemy. They walked for what felt like hours. The landscape changed from bare rock to scrub brush to a hidden valley where water actually ran in a small stream. A fire pit sat in the shelter of an overhanging cliff, surrounded by evidence of long use. This was his place, his sanctuary. Dakota set her down gently near the fire pit. He moved with practiced efficiency, building a fire, filling a clay pot with water from the stream. Claire watched him through half-closed eyes. Every movement had purpose. Nothing wasted. He added roots and dried meat to the pot, creating a simple stew. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something else entirely, something that made no sense given the circumstances. When he looked at her, she saw concern in his eyes, not malice. When his hand brushed hers as he handed her a cup of broth, electricity shot up her arm. Night fell quickly in the desert. The fire cast dancing shadows on the cliff wall. Dakota sat across from her, maintaining a respectful distance, yet she felt the pull between them like a rope drawn taut. He spoke again in Apache, his voice low and melodic. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Gentle. Reassuring. Claire's clothes were torn and dirty from days of walking. Her blonde hair hung in tangled knots. She must have looked like something the coyotes dragged in. Yet when Dakota looked at her, she didn't see disgust. She saw something that made her heart race faster than fear ever could. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Claire pulled her knees to her chest, suddenly aware of how alone they were, how vulnerable she was. But Dakota simply added more wood to the fire and settled against the rock wall, his rifle within easy reach but not pointed at her. She fell asleep watching him, wondering what tomorrow would bring, wondering why she wasn't more afraid, wondering why her last thought before darkness took her was about the way his eyes had lingered on her face. Morning came with the smell of smoke and something cooking. Claire's eyes opened to find Dakota crouched by the fire, turning small pieces of meat on a flat stone. The sun was barely up, painting the canyon walls in shades of pink and orange. She sat up slowly, her body aching from sleeping on the ground. He glanced at her and nodded, a gesture that seemed almost friendly. He handed her a piece of cooked rabbit and some kind of flat bread. Claire ate hungrily, realizing this was the first real food she'd had in days. The jerky in her saddlebag had run out yesterday morning. After breakfast, Dakota stood and gestured for her to follow. They walked to the stream where he indicated she could wash. He turned his back, giving her privacy, and Claire quickly cleaned her face and hands. The water was shockingly cold, but felt wonderful against her sun-damaged skin. When she finished, he led her back to the fire and pulled out a leather pouch. Inside were various plants and herbs. He crushed some leaves between his fingers and mixed them with animal fat, creating a salve. Without asking, he reached for her face. Claire flinched but didn't pull away. His fingers were surprisingly gentle as he applied the mixture to her sunburned cheeks and nose. His touch sent shivers down her spine that had nothing to do with the morning chill. She found herself leaning into his hand, her eyes closing. When she opened them again, he was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. He said something in Apache, his voice rougher than before. The words sounded like a question. Claire shook her head helplessly. She didn't speak his language. Frustration flickered across his face, but he didn't push. Instead, he stood and walked to the other side of the camp. The day passed in strange companionship. Dakota checked traps he'd set in the surrounding area, bringing back 2 rabbits and a handful of edible plants. Claire tried to make herself useful, gathering firewood and keeping the fire going. They communicated through gestures and expressions, building a language all their own. By afternoon, the heat was brutal. Claire sought shade under the overhang while Dakota worked on tanning a hide he'd stretched between 2 poles. She watched the way his muscles moved beneath his skin, the concentration on his face. When he caught her staring, she quickly looked away, her cheeks flushing with more than sunburn. That evening, as they sat by the fire again, Dakota began to teach her words. He pointed to the fire and said a word in Apache. Then he pointed to himself and said his name clearly. Tokada. Claire repeated it, and a smile crossed his face. It transformed him, making him look younger, less severe. She pointed to herself. Claire. He tried it several times, the L sound giving him trouble. K-layer. Close enough. She laughed, and the sound surprised them both. It had been so long since she'd laughed. The lessons continued. Water. Food. Stars. With each word, they moved a little closer to each other around the fire. By the time full darkness fell, their shoulders were almost touching. Claire could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell the smoke and leather scent of him. Dakota spoke again, a longer sentence this time. His hand moved to her hair, touching it lightly. Golden, she thought he might be saying. Or beautiful. The way he looked at her made her breath catch. This was dangerous. She was supposed to be afraid of him. The wagon master's warnings echoed in her mind. Savages, he'd called them. Killers. But the man sitting next to her wasn't a savage. He'd saved her life. Fed her. Cared for her burns. Taught her his language. Looked at her like she was something precious. Claire reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. His skin was warm and smooth. He went very still, like a wild animal deciding whether to flee or attack. But he did neither. Instead, his hand covered hers, pressing it against his cheek. The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Then Dakota stood abruptly and walked away into the darkness beyond the firelight. Claire sat alone, her hand still tingling from the contact, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She understood what was happening. She was falling for him. For an Apache warrior who'd found her dying in the desert. A man whose language she didn't speak, whose world was completely different from hers. A man who could probably never be accepted in her world, just as she could never truly belong in his. But none of that seemed to matter when he looked at her. Dakota returned, carrying his bedroll. He spread it on the opposite side of the fire from where Claire sat. She felt a pang of disappointment, then shame for feeling it. He was being respectful, honorable. Everything the wagon master had said Apache warriors weren't. As she lay down to sleep, wrapped in a blanket Dakota had given her, Claire stared up at the stars. They seemed brighter here than anywhere she'd ever been, more real. Like everything in this hidden canyon was more real than the life she'd left behind. Tomorrow she would ask him to take her back to civilization, to help her find another wagon train or a town. That was the sensible thing to do, the right thing. But tonight, lying under the stars with an Apache warrior sleeping 10 feet away, Claire admitted to herself that she didn't want to leave. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The third day started with tension thick enough to cut. Claire woke to find Dakota already up, pacing near the edge of camp like a caged mountain lion. When she approached, he held up a hand warning her to stay back. Something was wrong. He spoke rapidly in Apache, pointing toward the canyon entrance. Claire caught one word she recognized. Danger. Her stomach dropped. Were there others coming? Soldiers? Other Apache who might not be as kind as Dakota? She soon had her answer. Dakota grabbed his rifle and extra ammunition, then pulled her toward a crevice in the cliff wall she hadn't noticed before. He pushed her inside the narrow opening, his hands firm but not rough. Stay here, his eyes said. Don't make a sound. Claire wanted to argue, but the look on his face stopped her. This was life or death. She nodded and pressed herself into the shadows. Dakota moved some brush to partially conceal the opening, then disappeared. Minutes crawled by like hours. Claire's legs cramped in the tight space. She heard voices in the distance, speaking English. Her heart leaped. Rescue. But then she heard the tone, the crude laughter, and her hope died. 3 men rode into the canyon. Claire could see them through gaps in the brush. They looked like prospectors, dirty and hard-faced, with guns on their hips and greed in their eyes. They dismounted near Dakota's fire pit, examining his camp. One of them, a heavy man with a scar across his nose, kicked over the pot that still held last night's stew. Another, younger with missing front teeth, picked up the blanket Claire had used. He brought it to his nose and inhaled. "Woman?" he said. "There's been a woman here." The third man, lean and cruel-looking, smiled. "Apache dog probably has himself a captive. Let's find her and have ourselves some fun before we put a bullet in his head." Claire's blood turned to ice. She pressed her hand over her mouth to keep from crying out. Where was Dakota? Could he hear them? Was he already dead? Then she saw movement in the rocks above the camp. Dakota crept along the cliff edge, silent as a shadow. He had positioned himself perfectly. The three men below had no idea death stalked them from above. What happened next occurred so fast Claire almost missed it. Dakota dropped down behind the lean man, his knife flashing. The man went down without a sound. The other two spun around, reaching for their guns, but Dakota had already moved. A gunshot cracked through the canyon. The man with the scar fell, clutching his leg. The young one got his pistol out and fired wildly. Dakota rolled behind a boulder. Another shot. The young man's hat flew off. He dove for cover behind his horse. "Come out, you savage!" the scarred man yelled, still clutching his bleeding leg. "We'll make it quick." Dakota didn't respond. He moved through the rocks like water, appearing and disappearing. Another shot rang out. The young man cried out and went down, his gun clattering away. That left only the wounded man with the scar. "Wait," the man shouted, throwing down his weapon. "I surrender. Don't kill me." Dakota emerged from cover, his rifle trained on the man. I spoke in English, heavily accented but clear. "You leave. Tell others. This place protected. Woman mine. Anyone come here dies." The scarred man scrambled for his horse, leaving his dead companion and the wounded younger man behind. He rode out of the canyon like demons chased him. Dakota watched him go, then turned to the young man who lay groaning on the ground. He knelt beside him, examining the wound. The bullet had passed through the man's shoulder. Painful but not fatal. Dakota pulled the man to his feet roughly and shoved him toward the remaining horses. "Go. Don't come back." The young man needed no second invitation. He mounted clumsily and followed his companion out of the canyon, leaving one horse and one body behind. Only then did Dakota return to Claire's hiding place. He pulled away the brush and helped her out. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. She'd just watched him kill a man. Should have been horrified. Should have been terrified of him. Instead, she threw her arms around him. Dakota stiffened in surprise, then slowly wrapped his arms around her. They stood like that for a long moment, her face pressed against his chest, his hand stroking her hair. When she finally pulled back, there were tears on her cheeks. "You saved me," she whispered. Again. He wiped her tears away with his thumb, his dark eyes intense. "Mine," he said in English. The same word he'd used to describe her to the scarred man. "My woman." Claire should have objected, should have explained that she belonged to no one, that she was a modern woman with her own agency, but the words wouldn't come. Because standing there in his arms, she realized she didn't want to object. She wanted exactly what he'd claimed, to be his. She reached up and pulled his face down to hers. Their lips met in a kiss that burned hotter than the desert sun. Dakota made a sound deep in his throat and pulled her closer, his hands tangling in her hair. The kiss deepened, became desperate. All the tension of the past days, all the unspoken attraction poured out in that moment. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Dakota rested his forehead against hers. "I can't control myself near you," he said haltingly in English. "From first moment. When I see you dying, my heart knows. You are mine." Claire laughed shakily. "I don't even know how this is possible. We can barely talk to each other. Some things need no words." His hand cupped her face. "You feel it too. I see it in your eyes." She couldn't deny it. "Yes, I feel it too." The rest of the day passed in a haze. Dakota dealt with the dead man's body, taking him far from camp for proper burial. He couldn't leave a corpse to rot, even an enemy's. It wasn't the Apache way. When he returned, he and Claire worked together to clean up the camp, removing all traces of the violence. That evening, they sat closer by the fire than ever before. Dakota continued teaching her Apache words, but now his lessons included gentle touches, his hand covering hers to show her the sign for various concepts. When darkness fell, he didn't spread his bedroll on the opposite side of the fire. He placed it next to hers. Claire's heart raced as he lay down beside her. He didn't touch her at first, just lay there looking up at the stars. Then slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he reached for her hand. Their fingers intertwined. It was such a simple thing, holding hands. But it felt like the most intimate thing Claire had ever experienced. Tomorrow, Dakota said quietly. I take you to town, if you want. Help you find your people. Claire squeezed his hand. What if I don't want to go? He turned to look at her, hope and disbelief warring on his face. You want to with me? I know it's crazy. I know we barely know each other. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this can't work. Claire took a deep breath. But yes, I want to stay. Dakota pulled her close, and Claire rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, strong and steady. Like him. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But tonight, she had everything she needed right here. The fourth morning brought a problem Claire hadn't anticipated. Dakota woke her before dawn, his face troubled. He'd been up most of the night thinking, and the weight of reality had settled on his shoulders like a stone. You cannot stay, he said, his English rough but determined. I was selfish last night. Your people will search for you. My people, they will not accept white woman. We bring danger to each other. Claire sat up, her chest tight. So that's it? You're just going to send me away? I must. But his eyes told a different story. They were filled with anguish. You deserve life in your world. Home. Family. Not hiding in canyon with Apache warrior who brings you only trouble. Don't I get a say in what I deserve? Claire's voice rose. I'm not some delicate flower who needs you to make decisions for me. Dakota looked away. There is more. Things I have not told you. Claire waited, her heart sinking. Here it came. The real reason he wanted her gone? I am not just warrior, he began slowly. I am wanted man. 3 years ago, soldiers attack my village, kill women. My wife. His voice broke on the last word. My daughter. Only 5 summers old. I track the soldiers, kill 3 before others catch me, I escape. But now price on my head. Army wants me hanged. Claire felt tears sting her eyes. I'm so sorry. I can't imagine. I have nothing to give you but danger, Dakota continued. Every day I am hunted. Sometimes I must move, hide. This canyon is safe now. But how long? 1 month? 1 year? Then I must run again. He finally met her eyes. I cannot ask you to live like this. You're not asking, Claire said firmly. I'm choosing. And I understand the risks better than you think. She took his hand. My family is dead too. Cholera took them 2 years ago. That's why I was going to California, to start over, where nobody knew me as the orphan girl. I have nothing waiting for me there except more loneliness. Claire, her name was a prayer on his lips. I mean it, Dakota. I've been running from grief for 2 years, trying to find somewhere I belong. And with you. If that means living in hiding, if that means danger, so be it. At least I'll be alive. Really alive, not just existing. He pulled her into his arms and they held each other as the sun rose over the canyon walls. When they finally separated, something had changed between them. The last barriers had fallen. They were committed now, for better or worse. The day was spent preparing. If Claire was truly staying, they needed to make the camp more livable for 2 people. Dakota showed her how to set snares for rabbits, how to identify edible plants, how to move silently through the desert. She was a quick learner, and he found himself impressed by her determination. In the afternoon, he took her to a hidden spring deeper in the canyon. The water pooled in a natural basin, crystal clear and cold. Claire gasped at the beauty of it. Wildflowers grew around the edges, and petroglyphs decorated the rock walls. Ancient art from people long gone. My grandfather's grandfather made these, Dakota said, tracing one of the figures with his finger. This place is sacred to my family. I bring you here because you are family now. Claire touched the ancient art reverently. It's beautiful. Thank you for trusting me with it. They sat by the spring, and Dakota told her stories of his people, his childhood, the world before the soldiers came. Claire listened, asking questions, trying to understand this man she'd chosen to bind her life to. In turn, she told him about growing up in Missouri, her parents' farm, the dream she'd had before sickness stole everything. As the afternoon wore on, the conversation turned more personal. Dakota spoke about his wife, how they'd been promised to each other since childhood. It had been a good marriage, comfortable and familiar, but what he felt for Claire was different, fiercer, more consuming. With her, love grew slowly like plant from seed, he tried to explain. With you, it is like lightning strike, sudden, powerful, change everything in one moment. Claire understood exactly what he meant. She'd never felt anything like this either. Her one brief courtship back home had been pleasant but lukewarm. This thing with Dakota burned like the desert sun. I'm scared, she admitted. Not of you, of how much I feel. We barely know each other, and yet I'd do anything for you. Is that crazy? If crazy, we are both crazy together. Dakota smiled, that rare expression that transformed his face. Maybe that is best kind of love. The crazy kind. They returned to camp as evening approached. Dakota caught and cleaned fish from the stream for dinner while Claire gathered herbs she'd learned to recognize. They worked together like they'd been doing it for years, instead of days. After eating, they sat by the fire, and Dakota produced a small leather pouch. Inside was a simple necklace, a turquoise stone wrapped in silver wire. This was my grandmother's, he said. She gave to my mother gave to me before she died. I want you to have it. Claire's breath caught. Dakota, I can't. This is your family's. You are my family now. He fastened it around her neck. In my culture, this means we are joined. You are my wife. I am your husband. No ceremony needed. Only promise between us and the spirits. Tears spilled down Claire's cheeks. Yes, I promise. For as long as we both live. Dakota wiped her tears away gently, then kissed her. This kiss was different from yesterday's desperate passion. This one was a promise, a commitment, a joining of two souls who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances. When they finally lay down together that night, Dakota held her close, and Claire felt safer than she'd ever felt in her life. Outside the canyon, the world was harsh and unforgiving. Soldiers hunted the man she loved. Her own people would condemn her for choosing him. But here, in this hidden place, they had each other. No regrets? Dakota whispered in the darkness. Claire thought about her old life, the wagon train that had left without her, the uncertain future in California she'd been heading toward. Then she thought about this man who'd saved her, taught her, loved her with an intensity that took her breath away. No regrets, she whispered back, only joy. And for the first time since her family died, Claire felt like she'd come home. The fifth day dawned with disaster. Claire woke to find Dakota already dressed, his face grim as he checked his weapons. She'd learned to read his moods, and this one sent ice through her veins. What's wrong? Tracks, he said shortly. Many horses, coming this way. Maybe 2 hours behind? Claire's stomach dropped. The army? Maybe. Or bounty hunters. The man from 3 days ago, he told people about Apache warrior with white woman. Dakota strapped on his knife. We must leave. Now. They worked frantically, gathering what they could carry. Food, water, skins, blankets, weapons. Everything else had to be left behind. Claire's heart broke as she looked at the camp that had become her home. But there was no time for sentiment. Dakota led her out of the canyon through a hidden path only he knew, a narrow crack in the rocks that required them to move sideways in places. Behind them, Claire heard the sound of horses and men's voices. They'd reached the camp. Shouts of anger echoed through the canyon as they discovered their quarry had fled. The chase began. Dakota knew every hiding place, every water source, every canyon and mesa in this harsh land. But their pursuers were relentless. 12 men at least, well-armed and motivated by the substantial bounty on Dakota's head. The fact that he'd taken a white woman made it personal. They wanted blood now, not just money. On the third night, hiding in a cave barely large enough for 2 people, Claire and Dakota faced the truth. They couldn't keep running forever. Eventually, exhaustion would claim them, or their luck would run out. I have plan, Dakota said quietly. Tomorrow we reach place where my brother's tribe camps. They will hide you, protect you. I will lead soldiers away, double back, lose them in the canyons. No, Claire's voice was fierce. We stay together. Claire, be reasonable. You slow me down. Alone, I can disappear like smoke. With you, they will catch us both. She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. I didn't choose this life just to lose you. If you run, if you fight, I fight. If you die, I die. That's what marriage means. Dakota closed his eyes, pain etched across his features. I cannot watch you die. I already lost one family. I cannot lose another. Then don't lose me. We'll figure this out together. Claire kissed him hard. Together. That's the only way I'll do this. He pulled her close, and they held each other as the night deepened. Claire felt his heart beating against hers, strong and steady despite everything. This man had become her entire world in less than a week. It defied logic, defied reason, but it was the truest thing she'd ever known. Morning came too soon. They set out before dawn, but by midday they could see dust rising behind them. The pursuers were close. Too close. Dakota led Claire up a rocky slope toward high ground, but halfway up, a gunshot cracked through the air. Rock exploded near Claire's head. She ducked, and Dakota pulled her behind a boulder. More shots. The men had spotted them. They were trapped on the slope with nowhere to go but up or down, and both directions meant exposure to gunfire. Dakota returned fire, his shots precise and measured. Claire heard a cry of pain from below. One down, but at least 10 more remained. They had enough ammunition for maybe 20 shots. Then it would be knives and rocks against rifles. "Listen to me," Dakota said urgently between shots. "See that ledge up there? You can reach it. From there, path leads over ridge. On other side is my brother's camp. Half-day walk. You go. Now. I'm not leaving you. Claire, please." He grabbed her shoulders. "I love you. More than life. More than honor. That is why you must go. Give me chance to die, knowing you are safe. It is only way." Tears streamed down Claire's face, but she recognized the truth in his words. If she stayed, they both died. If she ran, he might have a chance. Might be able to escape once they weren't chasing 2 people. She kissed him one last time, trying to pour everything she felt into that moment. "I love you. Don't you dare die on me, Dakota. Find me. Promise you'll find me. I promise. Now go." Claire ran. Every step felt like tearing out her own heart, but she ran. Behind her, gunfire intensified. She scrambled up the rocks, skinning her hands, not caring. She had to reach that ledge, had to get to safety so Dakota could do what he did best: survive. She made it to the ledge and looked back. Dakota was surrounded now, the men closing in from multiple directions. But he fought like a demon, moving between rocks, his shots never wasted. She saw 2 more men fall, then 3. The leader, a cavalry officer, called out, "Surrender, Apache. We'll make it quick. Keep fighting and you'll die slow." Dakota's response was another perfect shot that sent the officer diving for cover. Claire wanted to stay, to watch, to know his fate. But she'd promised to run. So she turned and fled over the ridge, her tears blinding her, her breath coming in sobs. She ran until her legs gave out, until she collapsed in the dirt, until darkness took her. When she woke, gentle hands were lifting her. An Apache woman, old and weathered, was speaking softly in a language Claire now partially understood. "Safe," the woman was saying. "You're safe." They carried her to a camp hidden in a valley. Dakota's brother, a man named Naiche, came to her immediately. He looked so much like Dakota that Claire's heart lurched. "My brother?" she asked in halting Apache. Naiche's face was grave. "He led soldiers away, killed 5 before escaping into the Badlands. They search still, but they will not find him. He knows those canyons like his own heartbeat." Relief flooded through Claire so intensely she nearly fainted. "He's alive?" "Alive. But cannot come here yet. Too dangerous. Soldiers watch our camp, wait for him to contact us." Naichi studied her. "He sent message, said he will find you when it is safe. Could be weeks. Could be months. Weeks, months. An eternity without knowing if he was safe, if he was hurt, if he was even alive." But Claire nodded. She would wait. For however long it took, the days blurred together. The Apache tribe accepted her warily at first, but her determination to learn their ways, to contribute, slowly won them over. She learned their language, their customs, their way of life, and every night she touched the turquoise necklace at her throat and whispered prayers to whatever spirits might be listening. "Keep him safe. Bring him back to me." 2 months passed. Claire had given up hope. Surely if Dakota was alive, he would have found a way to contact her. Maybe he'd been caught. Maybe he'd decided she was too much trouble. Maybe he died alone in those canyons and she'd never know. Then one night, a shadow appeared at the edge of camp. Claire's heart recognized him before her eyes did. She ran and Dakota caught her, lifting her off her feet, holding her like he'd never let go. "I found you," he whispered against her hair. "I promised I would find you." They held each other as the tribe gathered around, welcoming Dakota home. There would be more challenges ahead. The army still wanted him. They would have to keep moving, keep hiding. But they would do it together. As they sat by the fire that night, surrounded by family, Claire realized something. She'd gone west, looking for a new life, looking for a place to belong. She'd found something better than she'd ever imagined. She'd found home, not in a place, but in a person. In the Apache warrior who'd saved her life and stolen her heart. In the man who couldn't control himself near her, who'd loved her fiercely from the first moment, who'd risked everything to keep her safe. No regrets? Dakota asked the question that had become their ritual. Claire looked at him, at the life they'd chosen, at the uncertain future ahead. She thought about the wagon train she'd lost, the conventional life she'd left behind. Then she thought about this extraordinary love, this impossible partnership, this wild and dangerous and absolutely perfect life. No regrets, she said, and kissed him as the fire crackled and the stars shone overhead. Only joy. And in that moment, despite everything they'd survived and everything still to come, it was absolutely true.